The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live.
Greetings, my fellow warriors, boy Meckanimal, and today I'm going to explain how I set up my conjugate method based training protocol for the past 9 months. And as you guys may already know, if you watched my previous video about why I feel like the conjugate is the most successful training style that I've done so far, the conjugate method, to reiterate what it is about, is a training style that just consists of 4 different days. We have the max effort day for the upper body, and then the max effort day for the lower body, followed by the dynamic effort day for the upper body, and the dynamic effort day for the lower body. So you have 4 days, and the concept is to distance both max effort and dynamic day by 72 hours. So the way I set up mine is I start with the max effort upper body on Monday, and then the next day I go with the max efforts lower body right away on the next day, on Tuesday. Then I get to have a day break on Wednesday, and on Thursday I go for my dynamic upper body day. And technically the next day, on Thursday, I'm eligible to go for a dynamic lower body day, but I usually take that day off as well because I have some family duty, and it's kind of my day off as well, so I get to run some errands and take care of all the stuff. So on Saturday, that's when I do my dynamic lower body day. And max effort days are usually really high intensity because, like the name implies, you push balls to wall to your maximum effort that day. So technically you get to aim for maximum performance, the max amount of load that you can lift on that day. And once you reach that load, you back off by 90% of it, and then you go for 2 to 3 repetitions with that load, and you're good with that. And then you get to take on some accessories, or in my case I've been using some assistance work as accessory. So that's when it comes handy, right? Because I get to still work on the skills while I'm focusing on increasing my absolute power in the domain of weighted calisthenics. So, and then you have the same thing applies for the max effort day on the lower body. The next day, same thing. You go for maximum effort day for the lift that you chose, and then you back off with 90% of it, and you go for double or triples. And in the different videos where I go on the detail on the program and how it went throughout the past few months, I'm gonna break them down. It will be a good series, and we will have fun. You get to learn from that, and those who went through a similar thing, you get to give some feedback, and all of us can benefit from it. And then after that, after backing up from the 90%, from the absolute pushing on the lower body, you get a 90%, you back off, then you get to use some accessories. And in the lower body field, I don't really have much lower body skill that body weight lower body skill that I'm training for. I have pretty much mastered all of them. So what I do is I just go for a conventional accessory work for lower body, the typical powerlifting accessories that I've selected and played around over time, see what worked best and what was too taxing, what was worth the amount of stimulus to fatigue ratio in order to be wise in the next cycle. And fast forward on the dynamic day, the dynamic upper body day, which will be the third day. Then I peak again. The movements that I've had in the max effort day on the upper body, I peak is that variation, usually the first one, and then from that I go for triples, and the conventional approach is to use between 50% and 60% of your maximum. I would say even the classic numbers when you go on the website is 60%. So people work from 60% of the max load for a set of threes, between 10 and 12 repetition. And I found that load pretty heavy because that load, that percentage is account for solely external body weight. But when it comes to weighted calisthenics, I had to play around with the numbers and error and trials to see which one doesn't give me too much fatigue, and because the dynamic effort day is supposed to prime you for the next absolute max effort day. So the goal on the dynamic effort day is not to fatigue you, it's just to stimulate you enough, tickle those fast twitch fiber and get you primed for the next max effort day, typically 72 hours later. And if you get to lift too heavy on those triples, because one more thing I need to mention is that you need about no more than 60-second break in between the sets. So that's a lot of sets, even though the repetitions are tailored to 2 or 3 repetition. On upper body is 3 repetition. You still have to take in consideration a good amount of load that within 60 seconds at the max you should be able to perform with the same quality throughout all the sets. And as you get better, you might reduce that to 30 seconds. Some people even go for 30 seconds. You just go on clockwork, and within 5 to 6 minutes you're done with your cluster of sets. So on the upper body, I pick that load, let's say the weighted pull-up for example, and then I go for 8. For myself, I started with 10 12 sets, and then you taper down to 10, and then on the third week to 8. That's a classic way of doing things, but it was just way too much, so I cut it down to 8 sets. And 8 sets with 3 repetition give me a bulk volume of 24 repetition, and those 24 repetition is around the amount of rep that you need to stimulate some good progression, right? So I go for 8 sets of 3, for example, and I peak. I've done like 60%, it was just way too much. Then I got down to 50%, still okay. And then I have followed Matt Wenning, which was raised in a question of the conjugate Westside Barbell School, and he has his own custom conjugate method that he came up with, by error and trials. And I've seen that he's used 30% for his bench press, the upper body speed day, as opposed to 60% that conventionally people prescribe. And his reasoning was that when you go at 60%, it's just way too heavy. You get to be productive for a short amount of time, and then obviously after a while you may be experiencing aches and overuse, and that slows you down on the performance, which is true, especially for somebody like me. I've had a whole lot of issues in my training journey with recovery, right? So I'm one of those people. I have to really play around and be strict about how I set up things with volume to be able to recover enough and then progress without burning myself out. So I've tried, eventually after like maybe 3 months of doing the conventional way, I've tried 30% of it, and I found that it worked best. It's just I was fast enough, and especially that you add the body weight plus the external load, so it makes sense that you want to get as little weight as possible to still be fast, because your body is moving already fast, and on top of the external load, then 60% would turn to be too much, because you start with 60% and each week you reduce the amount of set and you add the amount of weight. So you add 5% each week. Within 3 weeks you get to reach 70% before you can deload, or you change the variation of the movement. So I finally end up working from 30% to 40%, when you add 5% every week within that little mesocycle. So that's that. So once you get to the upper body pushing, so the way you do it is like what you call, on the max effort day, for example, right? You get to peak the upper effort day. You get to peak a pushing movement. Usually, like in the classic powerlifting movement, training style, you have only one upper body. The main upper body movement is the bench press, right? It's just that you don't have any pulling movements per se that you want to be training for max effort. However, on the lower body, you have two movements: one of the pull, the deadlift, and the other of the push. That's that's the squat. And what happens is, whenever you set up your conjugate methods with the powerlifting style, you get to alternate every other week from pushing to pulling on the max effort day. So I've applied the same. If you were to stick to the powerlifting, so pretty much your only movement will be the bench press, right, on the upper body of the powerlifting style training. So each week you get to have a different variation of the bench press. On the lower body max effort day, you have a different version of each pulling and pushing movement that you alternate every other week. So you do the squat this week, next week you do the deadlift. That's for the max effort of the lower body. And then the week after, you get a different variation of the squat. The week after, you get a different variation of the deadlift. So you alternate squat and deadlift every week, and over time you pick different variation of those that you go for max effort. On the upper body, you get to only have the bench press when you do the classic powerlifting style training. So you get to have a different variation of the bench press every week after week after week after week. So because in the calisthenics we have two different upper body movement, one of the pull, one of the push, the pull up and the dip. So I've applied the same protocol of the max effort day of the lower body to the upper body. So I alternate between the pull and the push every week. So I start with a weighted pull up on one day, the next week weighted dip, the week after a different variation of the pull up, the week after a different variation of the weighted dip, and so on. So my mesocycle will be 6 weeks, and before I get to maybe get a technical deload. But the first 6 months I try not to get a deload. I just get some recovery week. Only very few times when I was burned out, I just completely get like a week technical deload, like completely. Usually my deload will be like cutting the volume and still go for max effort day every week. So that's that. So that's how I set up my max effort day on the upper body, alternating between weighted dips, and the weighted pull up. On the max effort lower body day, I alternate between the deadlifts and the squat, and then every other week I get a different variation for the next 6 weeks before I rotate back to resetting and test the classic lift again, 6 weeks later on week 7. That's how I've planned mine. And on the fast forward to dynamic effort day. On a dynamic effort day, then I get to pick. Usually I pick the classic lift, which would be the weighted pull-up, for example. I don't go for any other variation of the pull-up. Just stick to the pull-up, and then I use 30% of whatever load I had on that max effort when I tested, and then throughout the following 3 weeks I go with that variation, and then 3 weeks after I try to either pick a different variation of the pull-up, whether I change the grip or not, or I just reset back to the week 2 of the last mesocycle, and then I keep progressing, and by adding 5% each week. Obviously, if you were to just keep going like that, you'd be the strongest man on earth. At some point, you start losing speed on a dynamic day, and so on. That's why you have to reassess everything in the big scheme of it, where you stand in your max effort, you don't see the ratios, and then adjust to have a new number for your dynamic day. And then and then how you do pull and push, right, on those days. So on the max effort day of the upper body, usually on the conventional powerlifting style, you get to just do a variation of the bench press, and you get to do 8 sets or whatever amount of sets of triples, fast, and then you go straight to your accessories or your assistance work. Because in my case, I use assistance exercises of my skill that I'm working as accessory to the big movement that I'm training, if you see what I'm saying. And then I just go for the pulling. I go for the same amount of sets for a set of triples, and then followed by the same amount of sets for the weighted dip as well, with a percentage of the lower percentage of the max dip that I've had, like the week that had followed the max effort for the upper body. So after 2 weeks, I already had enough data to set up my dynamic effort for the rest of my training up until now. And then on the we're gonna talk about the accessories later when I break down each week how I proceeded. And then on the dynamic effort day for the for the lower body, you get to go for 12 repetitions, right? 12 repetition of doubles, because what you notice is that you lose speed on the lower body movement by the third repetition, because the load that's so hefty, the quality of the movement is no longer the same after 2. So after 2, so 2 is the ideal number. Some people go for even 5x5, right, for speed work, if you want to just get it out of the way. But if you want to go by the book, going for doubles will be the best way to go. So I'll go for 12 sets of 2. Again, was the product 24. So as you can see, I went for 8 sets because I was doing 3 repetitions on the upper, and then on the double I'm limited to 2, so I have to go for 12. So I go for 12, and then each week I add 5%. And yeah, I like to mention here, so I've tried 60% as well of the load. It was good while it lasts for maybe the first 6 weeks, but still fatigue was there. I was beat up, so I cut down to 50%, and 50% has been pretty much a really good weight, so far. So I didn't have to go to 30%. I think 50% on lower body for speed work worked pretty well for me until I started incorporating the band. Then I had to use I use about 60% of the overall thing, and then I subtract the amount of weight that the band tension gives me, so I can, I'll get into detail. So 50% of that, 12 sets, and then the week after you reduce by 2, so I go for 10 sets. 10 sets of doubles again, add 5% as the load. On the third set, 8 sets of 2, and I add the weight. So you get 10% increase by the third week of the mini mesocycle, and then you reset again. And usually after the squat, then the deadlift is half the amount of set that you had on the squat. So instead of 12, the first week when you got 12, the deadlift will be six set of 2, so twice as less volume as the squat, because the deadlift can be really taxing. So you still get like 12 repetition as the volume for speed work on the deadlift, whatever variation you pick. The next week you get to have 10 sets of 2, right, for the squat, and then just so that you can match, you know, the amount of sets all together, then you go for single, for example, because you have the doubles on the deadlift that made the 12 repetition. And now fast forward the next week, you got because you're gonna accumulate fatigue. That's the whole point of reducing the amount of sets, so you can still be productive and not having to work too much. So at 10 sets of 12, then you match it with 10 sets of 1s. So you have two repetition less than the first week, but the second week is it's actually 10 sets that you do for singles, as opposed to 6 sets of 2 that you did for the first week. So you still go with the same ratio respected. It's just that it's evenly, it looks better because you get the same amount of sets for the squat, for the speed squat, and the same amount of sets for the speed deadlift. And the week after, same thing, reduced by 2 sets. You get to have 8 sets of 2 and then 8 sets of 1 for the deadlift, and you are set to go. Following that, you get to have the accessory or the assistance work. Usually on the lower body days, I don't have any assistance work because, like I said, I don't work on any skill. Now the lower body is all straight accessory for powerlifting, you know, classic movement. So I get to have those accessory for the front side, the front dominant lower body on the speed day, because on the max effort of lower body, the accessories are usually posterior chain dominant. Like you work the glutes, the hamstring, calves, neck, upper back, whatever is posterior chain, you hammer those after the max effort of the lower body. On the dynamic effort of the lower body, you get to hit the front side, where you get to work your quads and your core as well, your abs. That's when you get to see me using actually the opportunity to train my core. And that's how I've been using only the leg raise that I've built from only body weight to 45 pounds of leg raise, like within the past few months. Then now I've transferred to just the whole the V raise, so I get to be creative and testing things, see where I stand. It doesn't necessarily carry over to a specific movement or skill, but it's something that, given the protocol wants you to work on the core, I'm like, why not? I just get to test my limits in those things, and when I get strong enough, because being able to maneuver, be able to hold my legs, my heavy legs, have them being held by my hip flexors. So conditioning my hip flexors will be the best thing I can possibly do while I'm training, right? To be able to have, a good V raise, even on the P bar or even the front lever, having a good, some strong hip flexors in the flex position, the end range will always be beneficial. So that's the main exercise I've used. I've used the ab roller as well, but obviously after like 4 weeks, I kind of start diminishing diminishing the progress, because fatigue accumulated, because it's really taxing your lower back, and it started impeding my performance on all the main exercises that I prioritized. So I just cut it off right away, because it wasn't really, it felt more for show than actually building my core strength, because my core strength can actually do the movement itself. So I'll probably have a better use doing the knee assisted version and accumulate volume. That will be the best way to go about it if I ever decide to reintroduce it, because it's a really good exercise for the core. But for what I was doing, it was just too taxing to go for the full one. And so that's that. So to get the synopsis of it, so what's the conjugate method? It's a style consists of 4 days, 2 max effort days, upper body and lower body, and 2 dynamic effort day, upper body and lower body. You get to distance, separate the days by 72 hours to allow your body to recover and now to be fresh and boom, and spike up with speed. And then on the max effort day, the way I customize it I tailor it to calisthenics is by using the weighted pull-up and weighted dip as my max efforts, as the main movement that I wanted to improve on. So the max effort will be spread every other day by doing weighted pull-up one day, and the next week I have the weighted dip, and alternate to a different variation. The following week after the dip, I will have the variation of the weighted pull-up, and the week that follow a variation of the weighted dip, and so on for the next 6. Sometimes you can go to 8 weeks. People go even for like almost a whole year without doing the main lifts, just getting creative variation, because what we notice is absolute force is absolute force. Getting used to producing as much power as you can never be a weakness, and you get to circumvent the biological law of accommodation, and you get to not ever hit plateau. Can't say ever, but you reach a long, if you do it properly, by having so much variation, you get to always making progress, which I did for 6 months non-stop before it started stalling. It was amazing. And then yeah, after that you get to have the accessories that you add to the max effort, and on the lower body will be the posterior dominant exercises as accessories, and then on the upper body you just get to work on your weaknesses. My upper body, I use those accessories, as accessories I used some assistance work for some of the skills that I'm aiming to work on. Those are the ones that I introduced after the max efforts of the weighted pull-ups or weighted dip, and they still, provided that they're pulling and pushing, they still provide some help to the weighted dip and the weighted push up, because I'm still working the muscle needed to ultimately increase my weighted dip and the weighted push up. At the same time, I get enough stimulus in the arch type of the body to train the skill that I want to. So that's that. And on the dynamic day, I went through it, lower percentage, speed. On the dynamic of the lower body, same thing, speed, and then you get to do the interior dominant movements for the leg, and then you get to work on your core if you want to work on your core. So that's that. This is how I set up my training style to mesh with the conjugate method and come up with a calisthenics style of conjugate method. So hopefully it was clear. I know I was grabbing ideas and putting them together, so for somebody who is not accustomed to what it is, it may be hard to put it together, but this is as best as I could explain the whole thing. And yeah, if you're not aware of what it is, you can always Google the conjugate method of wet side barbell, and you'll get an idea of it. Everything is actually comment below if it was clear enough, and what else would you like to know about it. And like I said, I will work on a video where I go in detail every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks I'll go in detail of how my week went and stuff like that, recap of how the training went so far. That's a series that I may do, and why not make it part of my Patreon, because those things, they take time, man. If some people wonder why I do a lot of journal style training, so like I said, it's part of my digital imprint that I want to put, but at the same time it's something that I don't go out of my way, right? Because 95% to 100% of my training they are filmed, so that's a big part of my life. So people are lucky to have the raw component of it, so you get to see live how greatness is being made, and at the same time I don't have to go out of my way to to film it as something that I do automatically. which is a lot of work. Then I get to come home, edit it, and put it out. So it might be boring for certain people. It's not for everybody, and that's that. I've been talking about having some Patreon. Why not? For people who want to show some support and people who enjoy those journal type of video. I know it might be kind of it's not like a video that's very well sought out, you know. So asking people to join a Patreon just so they can have access to that, it would take people who really appreciate it, and it's something that I would like to share with the most people as well. So I'm in between, you know, trying to make a decision for that. But yeah, I'll definitely need a Patreon, so because YouTube has been full of it, you know. The algorithm is kind of weird, yeah. And your boy might need might need to do something about it. Patreon. We'll see. Let me know if you will be willing to join a Patreon, just so you can have access to some of these journal type of video, or maybe some with some voiceover, because yeah, the voiceover is something as well that takes some extra time. That's why I've been putting some badass soundtrack and just put out the training as well as it gets, you know. No angle, no crazy stuff, just hard work, and it does work. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and let us know, have you tried the conjugate style of training before? And if you did, what was the result? Well, did you like it? Was it too taxing? And yeah, everything is and will always be the Meckanimal way. Peace.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live.